Well, I'm sitting here with my daughter Rachel, and we're going to talk about why I wrote poems and how it all began. And it all began in Akron, Ohio, and it began by a couple of people who we now refer to as members of the Greatest Generation. My dad, Lester, and my mom, Adelaide, uh, met each other while they were working at Firestone. Firestone, they didn't just make tires. There were laboratories where they did a lot of other research and such, and that's what unemployed veterans did. In fact, my dad was probably lucky to get a job because he came from Richwood, West Virginia, and he knew that the only jobs he was going to get down there were working in a coal mine, which didn't appeal to him. So he made the diaspora, the migration across the Ohio River, and settled in Akron, as many West Virginians did. Mom grew up there. She was born there, went to high school there. Her parents still lived there. In fact, when she met my dad, she was still living in her own parents' household. They eventually married, and uh, I wasn't premature or anything, but it only took me 10 months after their marriage to pop out onto the life of Earth. And I can talk about the various places that I lived because that's a reminder of what I was doing at that time. And we'll start with my dad's, or their apartment somewhere near Kenmore Boulevard, which is kind of like the southwest section of Akron, but very, very blue collar, working class. And back in those days, you had neighborhood groceries, and some of them you might recognize the name, like there were A&Ps and Kroger's, but they didn't have parking lots and they weren't 40 and 50 and 60,000 square foot stores. They were neighborhood groceries. And they only opened 6 days a week. They were closed Sunday. And Saturday afternoons and evenings, just before closing time, was a pretty busy time to shop at the neighborhood A&P because prices were reduced drastically because there was no demand on Monday for buying Saturdays, especially meats and chickens and fish and things like that. So sell it or smell it was the rule. And my parents, they were freshly married, freshly newly minted parents, and they didn't even have a car. They took buses to work, and my dad was in college at Akron U, and to do the neighborhood shopping, they would just put me in the baby carriage, and they'd roll down to Kenmore Avenue and buy what they needed for the next few days' groceries, and be satisfied that they'd saved a lot of money. So when they did get a car, I knew my mom continued to work for Firestone, but this time, instead of in the south end of Akron, she moved to a Firestone lab up in Brecksville, which is really a suburb of Cleveland. And generally during the daytime, I stayed with my grandparents, which were doting first-time grandparents that, I'm their only grandson, so life was good. And my dad sometimes would, once he had a car, he would drive to pick me up at my grandparents' house on Packard Drive. And we'd drive up to Brecksville to get my mom. And probably carpooled with some other employees that she worked with. Because I know this was not a daily activity. But on the way, or maybe it was on the way back, on the side of the road, and the road was probably US Route 21, because that was the main road from Akron to Cleveland, there was a root beer stand. And behind the root beer stand was a corral that held a pony with a saddle on him and maybe some other trinkets. And little kids like me could get a pony ride. And it was probably real inexpensive. And if the kids couldn't get mom and dad to stop for root beer, then they certainly could get them to stop for a pony ride. And once you stop for a pony ride, you might as well get root beer because you've already turned off the car. So that was a good memory. After Kenmore Boulevard, they moved to my dad's first house with purchased with the assistance of the Veterans Assistance Bill, which was new to World War II veterans. And it was 978 Austin Avenue, which was kind of in the southeast side of Akron. It was just off Arlington Avenue. And it's funny because I learned later it wasn't that far away from an apartment building that my grandmother and my dad's younger brother lived in when they were doing the factory work during the war. This was less than 10 years after they lived there. But again, that was just something I found out later. Austin Avenue, I still remember the floor plan of the house. I remember touching a hot clothes iron that must have just been turned off, or maybe it wasn't even unplugged. But for some reason, when I was not supposed to be doing it, I wandered into a room that the ironing board was set up, and I touched the clothesline or the iron, and I left a little pink scar on my forearm, I think it was. They taught me how hot an iron gets. I didn't do it again. Good lesson. It's also my first memory. My first memory was probably a Saturday morning. It was after dawn, but with the window shades pulled down or the curtains. All I know is it was light outside. And judging from the reaction of my dad when he came inside my bedroom, it was too early to be waking up. And I probably was just thirsty and wanted a bottle of water or something like that. And I remember Dad walking in and squinting his eyes. He had a famous squint, and the squint was not a friendly squint. He squinted his eyes, and basically he needed to say nothing because the squint ordered me not to bother him for the rest of the day. But that is clearly, it's not a story that I learned from somebody else. I couldn't have. It's clearly a memory of mine, and I'm going to guess I was somewhere around 2.5. And I remember my dad's younger brother, Uncle Lowell, who we called Uncle Butch. He was still in high school, and he came and spent the summer with us. And I don't remember seeing it myself, but supposedly they were painting the house. But that was also about the time I got my first haircut, and there are photos in my album of me vigorously resisting and putting up a fight as this guy played football in West Virginia. He was an all-state football player in high school, and I was giving him a pretty hard time about containing me and getting me into the barber's chair. So that I remember.